Good morning to everybody. Welcome to this session, which is scheduled for IBPS Clerk and RBI Assistant 2017 Winning Techniques, brought to you by TalentSprint. So glad to see all of you join us this morning. A slight change in the schedule just for today on account of the rains out here. But thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. So this would be the first session for the English language though, and we're going to be focusing on the topic fill in the blanks. So even though it's specifically catering to IBPS Clerk and RBI Assistant, we all know that we can apply these techniques because we're looking at specific topics for all other competitive exams as well, right? With a whole load of exams scheduled this peak season, one after the other, I'm sure you can apply these strategies in other exams. So, good morning, Gurpreet, Nitish, Moni, Sundar, Nayan, Sheshadri, Bala, Gautam, Prashant, Sara, Rahul, Suman, Jagpreet, Aditya, Shakti, Sindhu, Narasimha, crazy. Interesting, I'd like to know your name though. Venu, Muttamil Chelvi, Narendra Chaudhary, Jagpreet, Anand, Chetan, Veda, Rahul, Kalyan, and Prince. You're not able to hear me, is it? Okay, I'll try and speak as loud as I can. So I'm sure most of you are aware of the strategies or the techniques that we apply when it comes to fill in the blanks, right? We usually identify hint words or clue words in the context, or we look for what meaning the context gives, right? Is it giving a positive or a negative meaning? Or we also, knowledge on grammar also goes a long way in helping us identify the right answer option given the context. But the technique that we're going to be focusing on this morning is collocations, right? Collocations, I'm sure, is a term that you must be familiar with by now, at least if you've been attending my sessions. Which is nothing but associated words, right? Words that go hand in hand because we've heard people use it repeatedly in various situations. So that's the technique that we're going to focus on for today's session, and we'll look at obviously context and then see how knowledge on collocations can help us save time when it comes to fill in the blanks. So the winning technique for us is always anything to do with saving time. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that, right? Anything that helps us save time in the exam is a surefire winning technique. So let's get started without wasting any time. Let me share the PPT. So we are familiar with the direction as always, right? The sentence is given with blanks to be filled in with an appropriate word. Here, in fact, it's 5 alternates are suggested for every question. So choose the correct alternative out of the 5 and select it as your answer. Let me just make that correction here. I'm going to change the font here. That's 5, right? I think it's more to do with the habit of getting into, identifying the error quickly, even if it's the directions. Okay, so let's look at our first context. We prevailed upon him not to dash to violence. Yes, absolutely, Rahul. That's exactly what I said, right? It's still the same. So, Jasmeet, can you quickly tell me, how did you quickly arrive at that? What are some of the clue words? So let's quickly look at it. Prevailed in this context means you're persuading someone to do something, right? So we persuaded this person not to do something, right? And I have a couple of options. In fact, everybody is giving me B. Except A and C, I have B, D, and E. So let's quickly look at what can be the right answer, right? Now, one of your clues, if you are familiar with the collocation, I'll tell you what the collocation is, but let's quickly look at the options, right? First, adjust. And I'm sure you have already identified the clue in the context. The clue is violence itself, right? So you are persuading someone not to adjust to violence is kind of unrelated and illogical in this context, right? Adjust is not even the right word. Why would you even persuade someone whether it's adjusting or not to adjust to violence? It doesn't make sense. So we can quickly eliminate option A. Venture. Some of you said option B, Raja and a couple of others, right? What's a venture? It's like almost I set out to do something daring. Right? Something daring. But is that the right context given the context meaning? We persuaded upon him not to dare to violence, again, inappropriate, right? Unrelated, doesn't make logical sense. Dictate, I don't think anybody said option C because it's an unrelated word here, right? Dictate means to order authoritatively. When you're saying you persuaded someone, so ordering, it doesn't go well in the context, right? You can't persuade someone to do something and at the same time order them also. So it's illogical. You can eliminate option C. Benjamin, this is for you. Some of you said option D as well. Consider. We persuaded upon him not to consider to violence. Again, if you're considering something, you're asking somebody to think about it, right? So in the context, in the given context, you can't persuade someone to, okay, think about, not to think about to violence, again is illogical, right? So I want you to, I had to eliminate all these options just because some of you came back and said B and D. But if you're familiar with the collocation itself is you resort to violence. So I'm guessing most of you did not opt for option E. One, because you're not familiar with this collocation. Two, you probably don't know what the meaning of resort is, right? What is the meaning of resort? Resort is nothing but to use or to fall back on, right? Excuse me. Or bring into play. So basically now it makes sense. We prevailed upon him, we persuaded this person not to fall back on violence, not to use violence, not to bring violence into the picture. So the collocation, if you're not familiar with, is resort to. Yes, good. So if you are familiar with this collocation, you will automatically close your eyes and choose option E, which is our answer, right? Some of the collocations that I want you to know with respect to resort, you can resort to violence, you can resort to force, you can resort to war. Right? And people have used this repeatedly in various contexts, otherwise also. Let me give you a context. The government resorted to censorship of the press, right? And if you look at it, resort to, it's a verb plus preposition collocation. It's good to know these, verb plus preposition collocations. There are different types of collocation as well. So it's good to know, what goes with what. So, collocations like akin to, you surrender to, right? So, you yield to. So these are certain words that go hand in hand. Okay? So yeah, Aditya, I'm sure like you, most of them were probably not aware of the meaning of resort. I have mentioned it here, Ashwin, right here. To resort. As a verb, this is the meaning, right? Please understand the same word is also a noun. I'm planning to go to a resort with my family, vacation time. That's in that context, it's a noun, right? So understand that one word can have different forms and different meanings in a context. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. We should not dash our emotions openly. We should not dash our emotions openly, and the options are yield, render, provoke, display, surrender. What do you think is the answer? Yep, that's another phrase Gurpreet has put out, resort to price control. Yes, so resort +2. So what about the second context? What do you think is the answer? Yeah, so why is that? Some of you came back and said, some of you saying yield, some of you saying provoke, some of you are saying display. Okay, so let's quickly look at it. See, I just told you, right? Collocations will help us even eliminate the wrong answer options as well. So, usually you yield to something, right? You yield to something. Render, what's the meaning of render? Let me give you some collocations. You render assistance. You can render an opinion. So in these collocations, what I'm saying is render means, what's the meaning? Can you guess? I'll give you a couple of seconds. What's the meaning of render assistance? What can the meaning of render be here? In the collocations that I've given, what does it mean? Anybody? Render means provide, right? Render an opinion means you are giving your opinion for somebody to consider or think about. Yes. So, we should not provide our emotions openly. Doesn't make sense, right? Out. Provoke. Some of you came back and said provoke. See, if I provoke you, I'm inciting you to, or I'm stirring up something in you to get you probably angry or something, right? When you provoke someone, so in the context, you can provoke, I can provoke you, and the resultant emotion can be an anger. But the context is not saying that. We should not provoke our emotions openly. Illogical, right? You can provoke someone and the resultant action can be an emotion, such as anger, or you can make somebody cry, you can make somebody fearful, right? Understand how provoke is used, so that's not the right context again. Most of you came back and said option C, provoke. Incorrect, right? Fourth one, display. What's the meaning of display? As simple as show or exhibit, or you're bringing it to view. You're exposing something to view where others can see it. And that's exactly the meaning that the context wants, right? We should not display our emotions openly, meaning we should learn to control our emotions. We should not show, we should not exhibit, we should not expose it to view so that people, again, surrender, you surrender to something, right? You can surrender to an emotion. So obviously, the answer is D. So surrender again is illogical given the context, right? Whether it's anger or somebody is provoking you and then you're surrendering to that emotion and you are reacting, right? That's not what the context is. The context is saying, ideally, it's good if you can control your emotions. So don't display your emotions. Don't show your emotions openly. So obviously, those of you who came back and said D, yes, that's the answer. So in a given context, learn to identify which are some of the words that I will use given a context so I can eliminate wrong answer options, right? So because I'm familiar with the collocations, I'm going back to the context. Yield to, you surrender to something, I will automatically eliminate A and E. And I'm sure render is probably another word that you did not know the meaning of. And that's why I gave you some collocations. You render assistance, you render an opinion, right? And provoke we just saw. Let's move on. The CM has given his consent to preside dash the meeting. Options: for, about, over, on, upon. Now this is again, if you are familiar with this collocation, I'll give you a clue word. Preside is your clue word itself. Preside usually goes with, and if you look at all your options, all of these are prepositions, right? So we're talking about a verb plus preposition collocation. I want you to, even if those of you who don't know, I want you to just think about what word usually preside goes with. You might get the answer correct. What is the preposition that usually gets associated with preside? I want you to think on those lines. Yeah? At least for this one, I see a lot of you again giving me, at least the majority of them are saying option C, and there are a couple of you are saying E, some of you are saying A. Let me go back. So it's between A, C and E. Let's quickly look at this context, right? Now the collocation for you is, you either preside over something or you preside at something, right? These are the usual collocations, that prepositions that get associated with the word preside. Are you following? So the CM has given his consent to preside. I don't have at, but I have over. And if I'm familiar with this collocation, I will close my eyes and choose option C. For, about, upon, on are incorrect words to get associated with the word preside. And that's about it. And what is the meaning? The meaning is pretty simple. Which means you are either holding, the position of authority, right? Somebody said Rukshar, yes, correct. To hold the position of authority, right? To preside over. So the Chief Minister has given his consent for this person to hold the position of authority, to take control. Preside at also means the same thing, to exercise authority or control. So be familiar with words that get associated with certain verbs or nouns or adjectives. Let's move on. He is willing to make a concession dash the demands of his employees. I will give you a clue in this context. The clue is demands itself. Okay? And we are looking at a concession is a noun. Right? How do we know that? ION, suffix. So which of these prepositions will usually get associated with concession? So that's what you need to look for, because we are applying the technique of collocations, right? Prince presided at a meeting, which means he exercised control at a meeting, right? To preside at a meeting, which means again this person is in charge. He is in control. I used you as an example itself. Okay, but you also need to keep in mind what the context meaning is, right? So he's willing to make a concession dash the demands of his employees. I want you to think about this. Let's understand the context meaning first. So the employees are making some demands. So this person is deciding to do something about it, which is he's trying to make a concession, and then we have to choose a preposition. We understand the context meaning. Let's go back and look at our options. Now, some of the common prepositions that get associated with concession is concession for and concession to. Let me see if I can give you some example sentences, okay? Maybe concession, So for example, if I say, okay, let's say the government decided to provide tax concessions for mothers who choose to stay at home with their children. Okay, concession 4. Sorry about that. Yeah. Or if I say, as a concession for being late, the driver offered me a 30% discount on the fare. Okay, so if you look at the, both these contexts that I've given, concession 4, concession 4. Let's understand these contexts quickly, okay? So both these contexts are looking at some sort of a reduction or some sort of a discount or some sort of a saving. So whenever you use concession 4, the meaning that it usually expresses is either a discount or a reduction or a saving. Okay, but what about concession 2? Yeah, what about concession 2? Usually, another clue word in the context is, I've circled it, right? Demand. So somebody is demanding, you're giving a concession, you always give a concession to the demands of his employees, right? What meaning does it give? If I have to substitute this blank with my own word, I will say he is willing to make a concession by conceding. That's another word, which means yielding to, right? He's saying, okay boss, I will give in to your demands and I'll give you a concession. That's what he's basically saying, right? So he's willing to make a concession, yielding to the demands of his employees, conceding to the demands of his employees, and the same meaning is what concession 2 gives, right? It's either surrender to whatever request, or yielding to whatever demands, or conceding to whatever demands. And in the context, given the meaning, that's the exact collocation that we need. Yes, there are concessions. You can have a concession on something. Yes, absolutely. Some of you came back and said that, right? But not from, because we're not talking about an origin or a source of something, right? And not with, right? With is a preposition that brings in the meaning of together. Only after the demands, in the given context at least, right? Somebody is demanding something and then you give a concession to the demands. That makes sense. But with is, it's not like you've already decided to give the concession along with the demands. It's like as though you had a foresight. Okay, they're going to ask for the demands, so I will give a concession along with their demands. That doesn't make sense. It's illogical, right? So definitely it can't be with. And on and for is not the right, it doesn't give the right meaning in the context. All right, so yes, we have other collocations, concession 4, concession 2, but it's also important to understand what meaning it brings in the context. And that is why it is option A and not any of the other options. Let's look at one more. The court has absolved him dash all the charges leveled against him. Again, your clue is absolved. Can you quickly identify which of these prepositions usually get associated with this verb absolved? Are you sure? There are only 4 options: of, with, in and from. Think. In fact, all of you have given me all the options except in. A, B and D. Okay, what is the meaning of absolved? Maybe some of you don't know the meaning of that, right? What's the meaning of absolved? Absolved means to pronounce clear of guilt or blame. If that's the case, the court has absolved. Let me give you a context. I can say Segu was absolved of all blame, right? So the preposition that gets associated with absolved is of, and that's it. If you know this, you know that it has to be. Okay, pardon, yes, Shakti, right? The court has absolved him of all the charges leveled against him. So that's what it is. So in the given context, we also need to understand how the word is used with or in line with other prepositions. You look up absolved, it is usually associated with this preposition of and not any of the other options that you have provided. So this is just to give you a glimpse into how important knowledge on collocations will play for you to identify quickly the right answer option given the context. But then again, you also have to understand the various meanings these collocations bring in context, right? For example, we saw concession 2, concession 4. Both are collocations. But in that context, or concession on for that matter, but in that context, I needed concession to the demands, right? So yes, I should be familiar with as many collocations as possible, but at the same time, I also need to know what meaning they bring to a context, which means I need to understand the context, meaning I need to zero in on some clue words from the context which will help me identify the right answer choice. But this is a good technique for you to save time, right? So you need to look at in terms of how we need to figure this out. How do we transition our knowledge on a particular technique or a topic to the and bring it to the question? Yeah. So what we can do is we're going to look at various topics one after the other in the coming days, especially this week. So we're going to look at a whole load of patterns, and whether it's a single blank or a double blank, you can still apply this technique. It's proven, it's extremely useful in not just saving time and also helping you identify the right answer option. So I want you to keep practicing about this, practicing this technique. Try and read as much as you can, because that's the only way you can get familiar with as many collocations as possible. Yeah. So hopefully you will do that, and I will of course catch you guys in the next coming sessions with other different topics, and we can brainstorm a little more. But please don't forget to keep applying the techniques. All right. So all the very best. I know a lot of you are writing exams one after the other probably. So stay focused, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 11, not at 11:30. All right. See you.